Hello and welcome to VCC TV. This is Joseph Rai, and I have with me Aman Malik, Senior Assistant Editor, to talk about the US presidential elections. Hello, Aman.
Hi, Joseph.
And thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
So the run-up to the US presidential elections has been sensational, controversial, very melodramatic.
Absolutely.
Both the nominees have their share of controversy.
That's correct.
And now a less controversial figure, Hillary Clinton of the Democratic Party, is expected to win the elections according to a majority of the votes.
That's right.
But what if Donald Trump wins the elections? What is going to change for India in terms of policies on immigration and trade?
Typically, I would have said, what if Donald Trump wins is not just $1 million question, but $1 billion question in this case, because there's absolute uncertainty that's likely to happen. Having said that, India is way better off. In fact, two countries, India and Indonesia, are two countries that are way better off as compared to most of the countries. And the reason for that is that, our fundamental business relations with the US are unlikely to change dramatically. Okay. Having said that, Donald Trump is not particularly immigrant friendly and has said that he would sort of do away with the so-called H-1B visa regime, and most Indian professionals, especially IT professionals, are in the US. Indian citizens who are working there are in the US on H-1B visas. So that is a major problem. It's going to be a major problem if he does repeal it. Although, once it's a different issue. It's one thing to say what you say as a part of election rhetoric, and when you're in power, you of course do things very differently. Number one, Clinton on the other, Secretary Clinton on the other end is quite welcoming of immigrants. Her policy is contrasting to that extent. So that is one area where Indians would sort of prefer if Clinton comes in. Moreover, if she comes in, it will essentially mean that she will be a so-called continuity candidate, because her policies will be carried. She's a Democrat. Her policies will be carried over from where Obama is leaving. Yeah. So it will be more or less status quo insofar as India is concerned if Clinton comes in. But if Trump comes in, then immigration will be a major issue. So that is where Indians will actually have to watch out for.
Okay. So we recently did a study on, traditionally whether the Republicans or the Democrats are better for India.
That's right.
And we got mixed results.
Yes.
Could you please elaborate more on that?
We got mixed results. What we did was we actually took Indo-US trade data for the last 30 years, so since 1985. Now, since 1985, from 85 to 92, 86 to 92, you have had, let's just break it up. You had, to begin with, you had Ronald Reagan, his second term. Then you had, George Bush the senior for one term. Then you had two terms of the President Clinton, that is Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton. After which you had two terms of George Bush Jr. and then you had Barack Obama. Actually, if you look at it, Barack Obama's period as president has been, if in relative terms, the worst for Indo-US business relations from India's perspective. The best period for Indian exports into the US was the period under President Clinton. Okay. And when exports actually, from our data shows that exports actually went up, Indian exports went up 180%. Okay. While during George Bush Jr., imports from the US to India, if I remember correctly, went up by more than 300%. So that was actually not such a good period for us. Barack Obama's time has only seen exports these last years go up by about 50%, if I remember correctly. So all in all, it is a mixed picture, that it's not favoring one party. And that is how economic relations are, because they're not just a function of what a political party or a set of political parties in various countries espouse, the policies they espouse. It's also a function of prevailing geopolitical conditions. If I may just add another one thing, between beginning of 1991, India sort of started its own process of liberalization, so it opened up, and the US was also growing at a very good pace. And when Obama came, and all this lasted till about say around 2006-07. Now, when Obama came in, Obama took over at a time when the world was, witnessing the worst economic recession we have seen in the last 100 years. Not the last 100 years, in the last 50 odd years. So that is where, that is why those things essentially impacted business relations between the two countries.
So a lot of Indian pharmaceutical companies and IT companies, they have exposure to the US. So how are the stock markets likely to react, and which companies will be on the radar?
Okay, so the stock markets have already factored in a Clinton win because opinion polls are seeing. Having said that, if she does win tomorrow, we'll know the results absolutely well around this time. Markets will go up like crazy. That will be a reaction, which will be a knee-jerk reaction before they sort of, factor in everything else. If on the other hand Trump wins, there will be a knee-jerk reaction. You will see a Brexit-like reaction because Brexit was not expected. It was a shocker. So if he wins, the markets will go into shock. But I think they will sort of, come back, because you see at the end of the day, like I said, it's one thing to talk about election, policies when you're campaigning. It's another thing to actually implement your policies when you're the president. So it's very unlikely that he'll be as unbusiness friendly with other countries, because he's been saying he'll be renegotiating NAFTA. He'll be, he has issues with the TPP, the Trans-Pacific treaty that they have. So we'll have to actually see how it pans out. Insofar as specific companies are concerned, IT companies like you mentioned, TCS, Infosys, Wipro, they all have major revenue exposure to the US. In fact, TCS, more than 50% of their revenue comes from the US. Pharma companies, Lupin, etc., all of them have big US exposure. So these stocks will be buzzing in all likelihood tomorrow in the Indian markets.
Thank you so much, Aman, and thank you so much for watching us.